if a guy has been jerking off to Pornhub for like 8 years before he ever sees a real woman in bed, like he's not used to paying attention to the same image for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 10 minutes even. So obviously he's going to have some problems, and like we could get into that later if you want, but like, you know, like training the mind, it's like a pretty fundamental, almost meditative thing to just be able to train your mind to focus on one thing.
Welcome to the Attractive Man Podcast, where we help men become better men. In these episodes, you'll discover how to improve your dating and relationships, how to break through your mental limits that are holding you back, and how to move through life with confidence and purpose. I'm your host, Matt Artisan. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Attractive Man Podcast. Today, I'm really excited because I'm with both Jules Bia, one of our expert coaches at the Attractive Man, as well as special guest Ruwan, who specializes in helping men become their most true attractive masculine self and was a libido columnist in Psychology Today. And so we're gonna talk about how to reclaim your masculine instinctual power as a man and become more grounded and present in both dating and sex, and thus becoming your most attractive self. So let's dive right in.
How's it going, man? Good to have you on the show.
What's up, man? Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, good to have you, man. So before we get into the arousal stuff, which I'm sure everybody's excited to hear, including myself, what are some of the biggest challenges that you see men having in terms of masculinity, dating, relationships, etc.?
The biggest thing I think that covers both sex stuff and dating stuff and life stuff is dudes, and I think people across the board have the worst attention spans in history. I mean, basic sex skills, you need a good attention span to get anything done. Basic creative skills, basic life skills, whatever it is. But like, you know, internet, pornography is a huge thing. Even just like YouTube, if you see a little kid with YouTube, you see like his attention span has shrunken. And if there's anything that I think men are lacking now compared to before, it can be seen in the attention span, because that's our raw material for doing anything with our minds. So yeah, there's obvious applications in the bedroom and in dating and life.
It's kind of like we all want the quick reward, in a sense, right? We want that like instant gratification, and we see so many ads everywhere, and our attention is...
It's an absolute mess, the modern day we live in. I was listening to this podcast about a month ago talking about how Google and Apple actually somehow program the phones to almost hypnotize you, to get you addicted, but not just with the notifications, but it's taking this it's taking this bio data or something, I can't remember the name, but it's taking this data so they have all of our data charted out of our attention span, our emotions and stuff. Somehow it can sense your emotions. It was really creepy. And it's literally designed to just make you a numbed out slave.
Yeah, because they have your attention. They can sell you shit. They can put ideas in your head, whatever. I mean, it's usually for money. Yeah, I mean, modern guy, especially a younger guy, his attention is pulled in 500 different directions before 10 a.m. Like, how could he possibly pay attention to a woman well enough to pick up on her micro expressions? Like, how could you do that if you're constantly scrolling to the next dopamine hit on your phone? And yeah, I mean, that's the biggest thing.
Swipe, 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 basically. Yeah, just give them Ritalin. Problem solved.
Yeah, and you think about like guys in the bedroom, like if a guy has been jerking off to Pornhub for like 8 years before he ever sees a real woman in bed, like he's not used to paying attention to the same image for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 10 minutes even. So obviously he's going to have some problems, and like we could get into that later if you want, but like, you know, like training the mind, it's like a pretty fundamental, almost meditative thing to just be able to train your mind to focus on one thing, and everything gets better. And I will say for men especially, like having a focused attention is kind of the point of like masculine consciousness, if you will. Like women can be all floaty and follow their emotions left and right, but like if you're the masculine pole in a relationship, whether it's sexual or not, it's kind of your job to keep shit on point. And if you're not doing that, you're kind of like a waste. Like you're kind of a waste of space. Like a woman can date another woman if she wants to date another person with who bounces around. So yeah, it ties to a lot of things.
Right. Women have what I've heard is called diffuse awareness, where they're focusing on everything, right? They have to focus on the baby crying and cooking dinner and, doing the laundry all at the same time. Whereas we're very single focused. We see the tiger and we gotta kill the tiger. But if we see a squirrel, we don't be like, oh, squirrel, get distracted, right? So that's kind of like what's happening now with masculinity. We're not focused on conquering in a sense. We're distracted and now we're not achieving goals or conquering, so to speak.
And this is biologically rooted. Like, if you inject testosterone, there's studies that show this, if you inject testosterone into a man, woman, or child, they will have a greater attention span in some ways. Their diffuse attention will get worse, which is the whole idea of like when a guy's watching football, he literally can't hear his girlfriend asking him to do shit. Like, that's like, testosterone actually affects you. You inject testosterone to a woman, she'll act the same way. Like, this is the point of masculinity for humanity. So like, it is, yeah, if you have a low attention span, a weak attention span, you are kind of less of a man in some ways.
And on top of that, I mean, even meeting and courting women, you have to have such a powerful focus on them to even feel and create that tension too, right? If your attention's everywhere, you can't even feel those little subtle energetic shifts in your body to actually be able to play with her, and kind of like steer the ship where you want it to go. And it's even in my own personal experience in studying this kind of stuff that you teach as well for many years now too. I noticed when I'm having sex, I would do experiments like actually focusing on her having an orgasm, imagining her having an orgasm, and keeping that really sharp in my mind, and noticing that her moaning gets louder and her pleasure increases, and then switching it off, right? And noticing that it actually starts dying down. It's not that there's no pleasure, but you can notice a very distinct difference when you're not focusing on her pleasure. And that's what I learned that sex is all about, is focusing on her pleasure. I mean, we get, as men, we get our rocks off by our performance, right?
So Ruwan, it sounds like this lack of focus plays out in pretty much every aspect of dating and the relationship. So like Julian was saying, in the bedroom, that's pretty obvious. But even when a guy approaches a woman, I mean, I've seen our students sometimes approaching and then they're like distracted by the people around them and they're like, hey, I just saw you here, and they're, a mess. Of course, on the date, same thing. If you're not focused on her and you're distracted by what's going on around you or your phone or whatever's happening in the environment, probably not going to be a great date.
Yeah, if you're paying attention just to how she might think of you, then again, like you're saying, you're going to miss out on the moment that she wants you to kiss her and she's just like subtly giving that signal off. If you're not paying attention, you're not going to see it. It's not like she gives you a sign or a letter that says kiss me now. Like, you have to pay attention. So like, and yeah, I mean, I think this applies to everything. A lot of sexual principles can be brought out of the bedroom, because you could think of this like in creativity or business, like you got to pay attention to those critical moments. So yeah.
Versus being up in their head, they're paying attention to that monkey chatter in their brain. What do I say next? What do I do? Those kind of things. So what is the solution, or what are some things that you've found that helps men overcome that obstacle?
Yeah, so I mean, any high attention span exercise where you're focusing on one thing will help. The thing is, like, what's the best one? There's like a lot of ways to lift weights. There's a lot of ways to train this skill or this muscle, if you will. I mean, this kind of relates to the sexual stuff. I think the best meditative practices do involve feeling good, do involve other people. It's like a lot of my training in sexuality came from like literally for hours on end pleasuring women. And then there's obviously a sexual skill, but the benefit I really got from that was an attention span benefit, in that like for me to pay attention to those like minute changes in her body or like in her needs, I had to really get out of my head and focus on her. And this, like, if you're sitting and meditating on a rock, you can start thinking about whatever bullshit and no one's going to notice. But if you are touching a woman's body and then you start thinking about football or something, or like your taxes or your worries or what she thinks of you, she'll know, and she'll get pissed off if she's honest. Like, she'll feel shitty. She'll give you that negative feedback. So it's almost a way to, I mean, I think the pursuit of being a great lover has so many benefits that have nothing to do with women, and this is one of them. Like, I learned how to increase my attention span in the presence of women who would give me shit if I didn't pay attention. So like it kind of kept me honest as opposed to, yeah.
What about the advice that I've heard, I don't know from who, but when you're trying to last longer, to think about things like football or non-sexual things, like take your focus off of her onto something else? Because I've definitely done that. I've done that before. Like I'm about to come. I gotta last longer. So I start thinking about non-sexual things.
Yeah, it's a good question because a lot of people, they have a very like mechanical view of sex. They think like, oh, if I feel good, I'm going to come, right? That makes sense. So if I feel better, if I feel anything, I'm going to come faster. And that's not the case. And we can get into the nuances in a second. But to address your question, I'd say, yeah, you could do that. Like and honestly, if like every time you sleep with your girl, when she's about to come, you nut first and she's disappointed, do whatever. I mean, I'm not going to say don't think about baseball. If that's what has you last the extra minute, fine. But if you want like a really fulfilling sexual experience over time, I mean, if you're thinking about baseball, you're not there. And like this can sound kind of like a mystical thing, but I think most women, if they're honest and pay attention, would agree like they can feel when you're there or not. I mean, so many women complain about presence, and like in sexuality, when you're physically touching someone, you can tell the difference between someone paying attention to the touch and not. Anyone can. Most people numb out that feedback so they don't think about it, but you could also learn other ways to last longer and actually be there and like experience the sensation that she's experiencing when she comes, when you're inside of her, or whatever the case is. So the baseball thing's not terrible. If it's a good Band-Aid, it's good training wheels. If like you really can't do anything else, you need something in the short term. But I think if you really want to invest in this as a skill for yourself and for the benefit of the women you're in bed with, there's other things you can learn.
By the way, man, if you're not already subscribed to this channel, click that subscribe button and ding that bell notification icon so you don't miss a thing. And leave us a comment down below. I'd love to know what you think about this video, or just leave a comment about anything you want. It helps the YouTube algorithm. Plus, we love to read your comments. All right, let's get back to the podcast. Yeah, I like that. That makes a lot of sense. So before we get into like those sex techniques, so it sounds to me like one of the best ways to really work on being more present, more singular focus, less distracted, is to actually work on that in the bedroom, correct?
Yeah, or anything relational, like even in a conversation with somebody where, well, I'll be specific. I think the best ways to practice are anything with emotional stakes with another person. If you can meditate on a mountain and like do that, great. But honestly, if that's the state you're in, you probably maybe don't care about this stuff, or like, you know, like if you're having trouble paying attention, or your attention is atrophied from porn or YouTube or whatever, or clickbait, whatever. I mean, when you're in the presence of a woman, nothing's going to keep, or anybody, nothing's going to keep you more honest than the feedback of a real person. And if you're a straight guy who likes women, what better thing to pay attention to? Like, there's always something that you could become more interested in with anything, but like, if you like to date women, the most positive feedback you're going to get is from paying attention to a woman, I think. Unless there's something else that you really find, you know, that sensational, then fine. But I think people is it.
So when you say paying attention to her, do you mean like reading her signals? Like she scratched the back of her neck. Maybe that's an indicator of interest or of nervousness from her. Things like that, like eye contact.
We're kind of talking about intuition now. So, I mean, this has been written about a lot by like guys like Malcolm Gladwell and Dave Kahneman, like this ability to thin slice. Like 1/3 of our brain is meant for reading emotional cues. That's why we can read, you know, we're pack animals. We're supposed to be able to sync emotions really easily. So very simply, if you pay attention to a person, not even trying to like read them for a specific tell, but just like really pay attention to, it might start with details like what their hands are doing. You might start noticing like eye movement behaviors or anything, not even judging it, not trying to be like, oh, this hair touch means she's 66% more likely to kiss me. Like, no, don't think about that. Just notice, right? Just notice, pay attention. Like everyone knows what it means to pay attention. And then the other thing to notice is how you feel. So like, if every time she accidentally bumps into you, like, and you notice, like, that's the 3rd time she bumped into me. I don't know what it means, but I'm getting a little aroused. There's a really good chance that she's giving you some sexual cue. And maybe if you had a video camera, you can see exactly what it is. But the cool thing is you don't actually need to know how to do all those things, because our limbic system of our brain can read what she's doing and tell you what it means by feeling. Like, you pay attention to someone long enough, you're going to sync up emotions. That's kind of like why if you watch a public speaker and they're nervous, it feels like gross. Why? Because you pay attention to them, they're now making you feel nervous, and no one likes to feel nervous. You pay attention to someone who's confident, it doesn't matter what they're talking about. You feel confident just paying attention to that guy because our emotional state syncs. So if you're paying attention to a woman and you're starting to feel like pulling away, maybe you said something by accident that turned her off. Maybe there's something you did. If you start noticing, I don't know why, but I really feel like stepping into her space, maybe a little bit closer than seems okay, but I keep getting that feeling. Not to say that 100% means that you should step closer to her, but there's a pretty good chance, unless you're a sociopath, if your limbic system works, those cues mean something. And like, if you're totally numbed out, the first times you start listening to your feelings from what you get from paying attention to a person, they might be a little off. Like, your emotional calibration might be rusty. But if you test it in a safe way, like, you don't just go around grabbing tits because you thought that might be interesting, but you're like, oh, like, I'll step a little bit closer. Let's see what the feedback is positive. You can learn how to trust, and like, it's not hard to regain, because it's a God-given, it's a nature-given ability to read people. Like, when you get that ability back, you can have maybe not 100% accurate confidence, but maybe 98% confidence that when you feel like kissing her, she's giving you a signal to kiss her, and then you don't have to worry about rejection for the most part.
Yeah, I always tell guys that. They always say, when's the right time to kiss her? It's usually when you start thinking about, should I kiss her? Right? Because you're feeling that. You're like, oh, wait, there's some sexual tension here. So what about guys that would say they get stuck in their head, right? Like, you're saying all these things like pay attention to your body, pay attention, what she's doing, and just, noticing things. But what about guys that are just like worried about what to say or what to do next? Maybe they're trying to be in touch with her and themselves, how they're feeling, but they keep going back to their head. Yeah.
I would focus on what you can control. So like, let's say a basic example, you're too afraid to speak to women, and like, obviously in the presence of a woman, you'd be so overloaded with all that stimuli that like you just spaz out, and like you can't read any cues. Like, your attention span's this big, she's giving you this much information, obviously you fry. If you can get okay with maybe not going all the way into that interaction yet, because your attention span will grow pretty quickly. It's regaining an ability, right? I'd focus on what you can control. So like, maybe you go to the club or the bar or the party, wherever you are, and you don't try to talk to someone right away if you know that you're in your head, because maybe you're hiding by the drinks, and like, at least you're in a situation where you can control your mind because the stimulation is not too high. Focus on feeling your body. Feel your body in that situation, and then it's kind of like a strength principle. You solidify that gain, the next level of emotional tension will be groundable or handleable, right? And then you keep moving up, and like, the gains can be quick. I mean, you practice this enough times with people, after a while, like, it's not a long time before you become very comfortable in high tension. It's just consistency.
I like that, and I like the idea of practicing at the club, like you mentioned too. I feel like that would be a really high intense environment with a lot of distractions. So if you can focus on yourself, what's going on with you, and then when you actually do talk to a woman or really anybody, and you're really like focused on them, and you can tune everything out, all the chaos, all the lights and the music and the people, and just be focused on her, like you create that bubble, that can be really arousing and connecting for both of you.
I love just walking up in the club, and I'm in that deep feeling state, and I don't even say anything to her. I just walk up and I look at her for like 20 seconds in the eye, and you just catch her in this kind of like trance, and you build this bubble, and then any just simple things you say after that are coming completely from your feeling. It's like a way to open up that feeling in that bubble state, like right away. I can't remember where I learned that from. I learned that years ago, but it's one of my favorite ways to approach. It's the most intense because when you start practicing that, your mind is trying to get you out of the tension. It's like, don't do this. She's going to freak out, or she's going to expect you to say something. And you kind of just learn to drop those thoughts, right? That's what I love about approaching is when you are practicing that focus, you're literally learning how to just drop and let go of which is I love teaching students how to do, especially even for the approach, right? To go and meditate on the stuff that got stirred up, and that's going to knock out the subconscious and have those overwhelming emotions that cause you to have, feminine like diffuse awareness when you're approaching, which, she'll never pick up.
Yeah, I remember when you were meditating in the club in, I think it was Chicago.
It was a tough night.
Yeah, because you got kind of in your head or something happened, and then you just like went off and meditated for like a while, like 20 minutes more maybe, and just like tuned everything out. It was cool.
That night in particular, remember when I did that line trick? I do this thing. I learned it from a TV show, I forget, but when there's a really long line at the club, I go to the back of the line. I took students, we were doing the New York boot camp last year, at this really long line. It wrapped like around the block. It would have been like an hour and a half at least. And I said, follow me. I was like, hey, Mike. And I just like kept walking through the line, and we cut the line in maybe like a minute and a half. It was hilarious. But I tried that in Chicago, and these two big buff guys like completely blocked me. And they wanted to fight me. And that was where I used that grounding, that presence, that awareness. There were these two like big jack black guys like, yo, you want to F around? I don't know, YouTube algorithm, right? And I dropped right into my body, and I looked at them. I was like, guys, we're out here to have fun. And because I was so calm, they just completely dissolved their anger, their challenging me. And like, you know what, man, you're right, but you can't go in front of us. I was like, okay, that's cool, that's fair. But after that, I was like, it was tough, man. But yeah, it's just like you're saying, even in situations with other men, the more grounded man wins, right? If you're, I've been in several situations where it was getting aggressive. It might have even gotten into a fight. And because I was more grounded and I was more calm and I was more solid, the other guy ended up chilling out, right? So like you're saying, yeah, it's such an important life skill all across the board to be able to develop that focus. One of my favorite ways, by the way, is candle gazing. I'm teaching this to our students in our new inner transformation program, Unshakable. So they're doing candle gazing every day to start to build their focus. And it really helps with inner work as well. It helps.
Is that when you just basically focus on the light for 10 minutes?
On the light of the candle for 10 minutes, and you drop all thoughts. And it's very powerful.
I like to do something similar where I put something above a TV or my computer, like a penny, something small, and then play like MTV or something that's, has a lot going on, cartoons, and then just focus on that object for 10 minutes while, that distraction is happening.
Gangster. That's way more intense, right? Because you have that distraction. That's cool. I want to try that.
So basically what it comes down to, what it sounds like it comes down to, Ruwan, is being grounded, right? Like this concept of being distracted by everything and not being focused is not being grounded. And when you are focused, you're like the rock, right? You're focused on what's going on when in front of you, the beautiful woman, or when shit hits the fan and there's tension in the environment, whether it's a guy being hostile or, whatever, an earthquake or a terrorist attack, whatever it might be, that you're not in chaos. You're not letting that, everything around you like, oh, what do I do? You're just like, okay, focus, gotta get out of here, gotta protect my girl and get shit done. Get the hell out of here, or fight this dude, or calm this dude down, or whatever it is, which really makes you attractive. I mean, it's masculine. A masculine man is grounded, he's focused, and he's attractive. So pretty much everything you've said is to become more masculine and thus more attractive.
Yeah, because I think it's important to know what's the purpose of groundedness. It's not like, I grew up thinking, a lot of people think like, oh, like a real man doesn't have emotions. Like you look at the face of like a John Wayne or something. But it's not that. It's that those dudes have such a huge capacity for tension. There's a sexual application to this, obviously. Like they can handle so much sensation that a bouncer can yell at someone like with Jules, or like a woman can be like in the throes of orgasm, or there can be some crisis, or there can be whatever, a war. And he has such a huge capacity that doesn't cause his like face to spaz out, doesn't cause his body language to like go crazy or for him to lose connection with the ground. Like he can actually just handle all of that. And yeah, I mean, I think we're going to talk about arousal control eventually. Like that's basically the skill of like, if you can handle a lot of sensation, maybe you don't have to think about the baseball because you can handle the arousal you're getting off of her. You can shoot up to, you know, 10 and 11 on the scale and still be able to hold it in your body without discharging your capacitor. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of applications for this. I like that. So let's talk about arousal control and sexual alchemy. I don't even know what that means. Can you explain that first?
Arousal control is basically being able to control your arousal. I mean, it goes by other names. People are calling it semen retention or ejaculation control. I'm calling it arousal control because, as I've been mentioning, I think the application is a lot larger than just not coming too soon. It's, as we were mentioning, your ability to handle tension. If you can handle the tension of a woman in high arousal and you can handle your high sensation for an unlimited amount of time, you could probably handle a lot of things in life. Same physical skill. It's like, does your body contract and tense in the response to a stimulus, or can you feel a lot and still just be chill? And sexual alchemy is kind of a mystical term. Like alchemy is the idea of turning lead into gold, or philosophically it's like taking your base emotions or base experience and turning it into something more valuable. So there's some applications if you can prolong sexual stimulation. You can use that arousal for positive effects emotionally, creatively, intellectually.
Is sexual alchemy basically transforming your emotions, or transforming her emotions into sexual emotions?
Well, I would say the other way around is transforming your sexual arousal into something you can do with it. And like, so I'll tell a story. I mean, I was studying Mantak Chia's work for a long time, and he teaches a lot of the physical components of drawing the energy out of your genitals and up your spine. And for a long time, that was kind of confusing to me, even though I was doing a lot of those practices. I was doing a lot of sexual stuff. I was practicing it. But I didn't really get like the whole, like past a certain point in my body, I couldn't feel arousal move. I didn't really know what he was talking about. And I was getting head from this woman once upon a time. And I noticed, I don't know why this happened this time and not other times, but I noticed that as I started to come, I wanted to laugh. And that seemed like a very bizarre thing. And honestly, I probably had felt like doing that before, but I thought it would be too goofy, or like I didn't want her to think like, what the fuck's this guy doing? Laughing while I'm giving him head or something. But for this time, for some reason, I just let it fly. And whatever, she maybe thought it was a little weird. But I noticed the level of joy I felt was higher than, it just didn't make sense to me. And like, essentially my model for understanding here is that I took this raw emotion, or this raw sensation, at the base level, our reptilian nervous system processes feeling as sensation. Pleasure, obviously, sexual, it's like a raw thing you could feel in your body, but it's localized, right? Like, emotion is the next level of that, where your mammalian brain is now processing the same stimulus, but now at a more nuanced level. Emotion is a little more complex than sensation. So that's like a very simple transmutation. Arousal gave me the giggles, right? And like you can see this like with women, like if you've ever given a woman or seen a woman have a big orgasm and she starts crying, it's a very similar thing that happens a little more naturally with women, because their sensation to emotion connection, their genital heart connection maybe is a little more open than most guys. But like that in itself is a transmutation. You're taking this raw material of arousal and turning it into joy. And then you can take it higher levels to creativity and like expansive thinking and mental well-being, all off of this positive sensation from our lower body.
I have a story from a few months ago, actually, with a partner that I was with. We had probably had sex for probably like 3.5, almost 4 hours one night. And every time I would get close, I would stop and I would just get her to kind of caress my body and help me absorb the energy more. And it got to the point where like something broke inside of me. And for about 45 minutes, grief would come up, and then I would hysterically laugh, and then more grief, and then hysterical laughter. And then eventually it turned into probably the last 15 minutes of just ecstatic, hysterical laughter. And like my body's just like going like this and like moving and stuff. It was phenomenal. I've had several of those.
What did she think of that?
Oh, she was woke. Like she wasn't, she knows about this stuff. And also when I have a partner, after the first couple times I communicate to them this kind of stuff that I practice, you may see things like I'll have an orgasm and I'll just hysterically be laughing and just like, my body will be like out of control for like even like 5 or 10 minutes. And I was like, so don't take offense to it. It's actually a very good thing. Okay. Just enjoy it. I've never really had a problem. I just communicate that I'm going to be very different than probably all of the men you've ever had sex with, basically. And it's fun because then they challenge that. So
I guess my sex is way too standard. I don't laugh or cry or anything. So I have a question then, Ruwan. Does that mean when you're having sex or you're being intimate with someone, that whatever comes up emotionally, energetically, you should just go with it versus like suppressing it? Because I'm sure a lot of guys, I'm sure myself, have felt certain things, whether it's laughter or whatever, during sex, and just like kind of pushed it back down. Like, no, this isn't really appropriate right now.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to most impulses, when you suppress them, there typically is something not good that happens. I mean, it's kind of like a basic psychological idea. Yeah, and like when it comes to feeling states, I actually say like the whole reason why I got into sexuality was that for various reasons, I had gotten so into my head and gotten so used to suppressing instincts that it actually made me impotent. Like I was 23, I was physically healthy, my hormones were normal, the urologist said I was fine, but for like a year I was dependent on Viagra because I was just so cut off from my sensations that my body literally numbed out because I was numbing out my emotions so much. And that's what got me into this whole thing, like over this process of like sensitizing my body, but also learning how to feel my impulses and listen to small desires. That's how I got my mojo back and then some. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I would. Like, there's no reason to not. I mean, what's the worst that would happen? She thinks less of you. Like, do you want to cater to that, or do you want to express yourself? Is the question. Like, no one's getting hurt by you laughing. So, yeah, and anything, and like, whether you're in a relationship or it's a one night stand or whatever, like a good woman will get it eventually, even if they think it's weird. Like, I'll say like, anytime I do MDMA and I have sex the next day, I always cry. I can't help it. I don't know, serotonin dump, I have no idea, but like it's just a thing that I expect and it just happens, and I could talk about it with the person before or afterwards, and these are just feelings. Like, this is why humans exist. This is why we connect. So like, why suppress that?
I like that. That makes a lot of sense. What are some other arousal control techniques or just ways of that a man can be better in bed and please his woman?
Yeah, so one of the basic physical sides of this is being able to draw the sensation out of your genitals, which I know can probably sound like crazy to some people, but if you just consider that if you pay attention to any body part, you will start to notice sensations more. Just like we were talking about in the beginning, like you pay attention to something, you feel more of it even if it's connected to you, especially if it's connected to you. And the sensation of arousal, most of us, when we're having sex or being sexually stimulated, it stays localized in our genitals. And if you can draw that sensation out of your genitals, whether it's up your spine the way Taoist and Tantra people teach, or like just anywhere out of your body, you're preventing that from getting saturated to the point where you can't control it. It's like you're spreading it out rather than having it get too hot in one spot. So the technique I teach guys in the beginning who maybe I just don't know how to start is if you feel sexual stimulation by yourself with a partner, so you can actually see, or you can recognize like, oh, I feel like sensation in my dick. Like, that's where it is. I can feel it. It's very clear. You can imagine attaching a color to it, golden, light, red, whatever, purple, it doesn't matter. And then do your best to feel, just imagine that like substance moving into your body and up your spine, like into your sacrum, up your tailbone, for instance. And at first you might not be sure if it's in your head or not. You might just be faking it. You might just be imagining the golden light move. But eventually you will start to notice that that sensation starts to diffuse into your body. Now it's spreading out instead of just being in this one spot. And if you imagine that, like, you have a balloon in your sexual capacity, and once it's full, it pops, meaning you come. If you can just make the balloon bigger, obviously you could fill more air, if air is sensation. So, like, that's the basic idea. Like, if a guy can just pull it out of his genitals, so it's not just localized there, he'll last longer, he'll feel better. He might feel it in his whole body. When he does come, if he chooses to come or whatever, he'll feel it like a whole body orgasm, or more of his body rather than just like a genital sneeze. And actually, my alternate tip to people who normally think of baseball stats to come, like, forget about all this stuff if it's too complicated for you. I basically tell guys, if you're about to come, think about your hands and your feet. Like, still pay attention to the woman. Just notice what your palms feel like. Notice what your feet feel like. Just noticing that will draw the sensation to your extremities. The hands and feet only because they're the farthest thing from your dick. You just think about that. Still have sex. Still pay attention to your body. Still pay attention to her. Just notice your hands and feet. It'll be almost like you're spreading out the sensation to your entire physical body instead of, however big your dick is. And that almost always will help a guy last at least a few minutes longer.
I like that. I'm definitely going to try that. Instead of thinking about baseball or, whatever, like, try to think of something non-sexual. Like, that way you're still in the moment, but you're focusing on your own body. I like that. Right? So that way you stay connected with her, and at the same time, you're lasting longer. And it sounds like not only are you lasting longer, but the pleasure would get more intense, because it's not just in that one spot. It's just not on your dick. It's throughout your body now.
Yeah, and when the pleasure increases for you, it should be easier for you to pay attention. Like, we would assume, if you like what's going on. So, like, yeah, I mean, it's a win-win-win across the board.
What about lasting too long? Is that such a thing? Because I've heard women say that if the guy lasts too long, that she starts to wonder, like, what's wrong? Why can't I make him finish? And she starts, like, getting in her head, thinking, like, okay, like, am I not good enough? Am I not hot enough that he can't come?
Yeah, I mean, there's two things in there. I mean, the first thing is, like, what Julian was mentioning, like, expectations. Like, if you just tell her, like, I don't come every time, not about you, like, she'll get it, right? It can be hard with some women, especially if they've only had sex with guys who are only having sex like they learned from porn. They might think that something's wrong. Just got to explain it to them. It's a simple conversation. But there's another thing in there with, like, I've heard this from women in, like, the tantra world or anything, like, they're with guys and, like, they're done after X amount of time. They're done after an hour, but this guy wants to keep going and going and going. And I'd actually say, I mean, there's something, if that is the case where two people are so far off in what they want, they're not connected. And maybe he learned some physical techniques to last longer, or maybe he's on Viagra or he's on something, but, like, if you really want to do something and she really doesn't, then you're definitely not connected. This goes for anything sexual or even pre-sexual. So, like, because, like, if you're really tuned into a woman and she's the type of woman that, say, after she orgasms, she just doesn't want to be touched. Like, there's some women who come like that. Like, they're not multi-orgasmic, they're just not into it. If you're with a woman like that and you feel her orgasm, if you really are tuned in, your erection's probably going to go down a little bit, or your sensation's going to go down because you're responding to her arousal. And if her arousal is gone, or if the sensation doesn't feel good to her, if you're tuned into her, it's not going to feel as good to you. Doesn't mean you want exactly the same thing, but, like, if she's satisfied and done with it, and you really want to keep going, then someone's not, like, you guys are not on the same page. And the beauty is when you learn how to connect and intuit and tune into someone, for the most part, you end up wanting the same things in the same moments just about. And that's, like, one of the beauty of connected sex. Like, you don't have to really worry about doing something for her versus for me. If you're really connected, they become almost the same thing.
Yeah, you said a lot of good things there, man. It's like, wow. Okay, is it possible for guys to be multi-orgasmic, or is that only for women?
It is something that men are capable of. I mean, Matt Artisan talks about this a lot, and his programs are designed for that. I have had multiple orgasms. It's not something that occurs for me often. But yeah, it is possible. It is possible through... you can learn how to separate ejaculation from orgasm in a way that you have the wave of pleasure without the contraction that comes afterwards, because they're not exactly the same thing. And even for a guy who has regular sex, you'll notice the wave of pleasure comes maybe right before the first contraction, or maybe you feel a little bit more between contraction 1 contraction 2. Let's say you have 8 contractions when you come. The last 6, they're not an orgasm anymore. They're just like, there's you expelling fluid. And maybe that has like a visual appeal, or like you associate that with pleasure, but that in itself doesn't actually feel good. So if you can learn how to separate them a little bit, you can have that wave without coming, and then you can, as long as you don't ejaculate, you won't go into a refractory period, so you can continue.
Do you think that's an important thing to learn, like an important skill during sex, or not so much?
I haven't found it to be like something I really want to prioritize. It does take work. It does take a lot of practice. However, I'm a younger guy. Guys I know who study the same thing, who are like over 40, all say like, you got to learn how to do this, because after 40, nutting just takes too much out of you. And I can't speak to that myself. So, but I've heard from older people that is a good skill to have for sure.
Yeah, I've only been able to do it once or twice. It was kind of like by accident. It just happened. Like, whoa, that was cool. Like all this pleasure throughout the body without actually coming. So it'd definitely be cool to learn how to do it more. Well, Ruwan, man, this has been really valuable. Where can guys learn more?
Yeah, well, the best way is to go to arousalcontrolsecrets.com. I have some free training there, which will go over a lot of the fundamentals we talked about, understanding your sensational capacity, understanding the principles of reinvesting arousal rather than spending it, rather than saving it like no-fap guys do. And we actually go through some of the physical exercises. I break it down a little more step by step than we talked about here, to actually learn how to draw that energy into your body for obviously the purpose of lasting long in the bedroom. But as we've been speaking about, the applications go far beyond lasting long. They go into your ability to handle tension, your ability to be a good lover even out of the bedroom, your ability to focus your mind, your ability to handle your feelings, which applies to everything. And that can be accessed at arousalcontrolsecrets.com.
There you go, guys. Make sure to check Ruwan out. Make sure to click that link in the description to learn more. And subscribe to this channel if you're not already subscribed. Do it, man, and click that bell notification icon so you don't miss a thing, and leave us a comment down below. We'd love to hear from you. All right, we're the Attractive Man team. I hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.